The locked door of the storage shed rattled against Naomi Jensen's bruised palms as she pounded with what little strength remained in her trembling arms, her voice hoarse from screaming into the Colorado darkness that swallowed every desperate plea for help. It had started innocently enough that afternoon in late August of 1882 when her brother-in-law Raymond had asked her to help fetch supplies from the storage shed behind the ranch house where she had lived for the past 3 years since marrying his younger brother Thomas. Thomas had been dead for 6 months now, killed in a mining accident up in the San Juan Mountains, and Naomi had stayed on at the ranch because she had nowhere else to go. Her own family back in Pennsylvania had disowned her for marrying a Westerner, and the small amount of money Thomas left behind was barely enough to survive on. Raymond had insisted she stay, claiming it was what Thomas would have wanted, that family took care of family in these harsh Colorado lands. But Raymond's kindness had curdled into something darker over the past few weeks. He had started making comments about how it was improper for a widow to live alone with her husband's brother, how people in Manassas were starting to talk, how she needed to either marry him to make things respectable or sign over her share of the ranch that Thomas had left her in his will. Naomi had refused both options. She did not love Raymond, did not even particularly like the man with his cold eyes and cruel mouth, and she would not give up the only security she had left in this world. That afternoon, Raymond had followed her into the shed, and when she turned around with her arms full of grain sacks, she saw something dangerous flash across his face. He had stepped forward, backing her against the rough wooden wall, and told her she was being foolish, that she would change her mind once she realized how vulnerable she truly was out here. Before she could respond, before she could even process the threat in his words, he had shoved her hard enough that she fell to the dirt floor, the grain sacks scattering around her. Then he had walked out, and she heard the heavy bolt slide into place on the outside of the door. She had screamed and pounded on the door until her throat was raw and her hands were bloody. She had thrown herself against the wood until her shoulder throbbed with pain. But the shed was solid, built to withstand Colorado's harsh winters, and no one came. The ranch was isolated, sitting on the outskirts of Manassas, with the nearest neighbor more than 2 miles away. Raymond had planned this carefully, she realized, with growing horror. He had sent the two ranch hands into town that morning on errands that would keep them away overnight. As darkness fell and the August heat gave way to the sharp cold of a mountain night, Naomi sank down against the wall and wrapped her arms around herself. She was wearing only a simple cotton dress, nothing warm enough for the temperature that would drop close to freezing before dawn. The shed offered no protection from the cold wind that whistled through the gaps between the boards, and she had no blanket, no coat, nothing but the thin fabric of her dress and the determination to survive until morning. She thought about Thomas, about how gentle he had been, how different from his brother. Thomas had courted her properly when he came back east on business, had promised her a life of adventure and freedom in the West. She had been 19 and foolish, and in love with the idea of escape from her rigid family. The reality had been harder than she had imagined, but Thomas had been true to his word, had worked hard to build a life for them, had treated her with kindness and respect. His death had shattered her world, and now his brother was trying to take even the small piece of security Thomas had left behind. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Naomi dozed fitfully, jerking awake whenever the cold became unbearable, forcing herself to move, to walk in small circles to keep her blood flowing. Her teeth chattered, and her entire body shook with violent shivers. She prayed, though she was not sure anyone was listening, and she tried to make plans for what she would do when morning came. If morning came. If Raymond decided to let her out at all. What if he left her here for days? What if he told people she had run off, abandoned the ranch, and no one thought to look in the shed until it was too late? The fear was almost worse than the cold, but she pushed it down, forced herself to breathe slowly, to stay calm. She would survive this night. She had to. The darkness seemed endless, but eventually she noticed the faintest change in the quality of the blackness, a subtle shift from pitch dark to the deep blue gray that preceded dawn. She pulled herself to her feet, stamping to restore feeling to her numb legs, and pressed her face against the gap between two boards, desperate for the sight of the rising sun. That was when she heard it, the sound of hoofbeats approaching at a gallop, fast and urgent. Hope surged through her chest, and she began pounding on the door again, screaming with what little voice she had left. The hoofbeats grew louder, closer, and then they stopped just outside the shed. She heard a man's voice, deep and rough, cursing under his breath, and then his boots hit the ground. She pounded harder, crying out, and the voice called back to her, "Stand away from the door! Get to the back wall if you can hear me." Naomi stumbled backward, her legs barely holding her weight, and pressed herself against the far wall just as the door exploded inward with a tremendous crash. The morning light flooded in, blinding her after hours in the darkness, and a tall figure filled the doorway, silhouetted against the dawn sky. "Are you hurt?" The voice was urgent, concerned, and as her eyes adjusted to the light, she saw him clearly for the first time. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing dusty traveling clothes and a dark hat pushed back on his head. His face was all hard angles and weathered tan skin, with a strong jaw shadowed by a few days of stubble. But his eyes were what caught her attention. They were a striking pale blue, and they looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch despite her exhaustion and fear. "Cold," she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. "So cold." He was across the shed in 3 long strides, shrugging out of his heavy coat as he moved. He wrapped it around her shoulders, and the warmth of it, still holding the heat from his body, made her gasp. The coat smelled like leather and sage and something masculine that she could not quite name. "Can you walk?" he asked, his hand steadying her when she swayed. "I think so," she said, but when she took a step, her legs buckled. He caught her easily, sweeping her up into his arms as though she weighed nothing at all. "I have got you," he said quietly, and carried her out of the shed into the golden light of dawn. The fresh air hit her like a physical thing, sweet and clean after the musty closeness of the shed, and she gulped it down gratefully. He carried her toward the ranch house, his strides long and purposeful, and she saw Raymond standing on the porch, his face pale and his eyes wide with what might have been fear or anger, she could not tell which. "What the hell do you think you are doing, Quinn?" Raymond's voice was sharp, defensive. "That is my sister-in-law. Put her down." "Your sister-in-law who you locked in a shed all night?" The man carrying her, Quinn, apparently did not stop walking. His voice was deadly calm, which somehow made it more frightening than if he had shouted. "The sister-in-law who was screaming for help and freezing to death while you slept warm in your bed? I do not know what lies she has been telling you, but she locked herself in there by accident. I only just realized—" "The bolt is on the outside of the door, Jensen. A person cannot lock themselves in from the inside. Do not insult my intelligence or waste my time with lies." Quinn mounted the porch steps, and Raymond had to step aside or be walked over. "Where is her room?" Naomi found her voice, hoarse as it was. "Upstairs, second door on the left." Quinn carried her through the house, up the stairs, and into her small bedroom. He set her down gently on the bed, then went to the fireplace and began building a fire with efficient, practiced movements. Within minutes, flames were crackling, spreading warmth through the cold room. He turned back to her, and his expression softened slightly. "Do you have warmer clothes? Blankets?" She nodded, pointing to the chest at the foot of the bed and the quilt folded on the chair. He brought her the quilt first, spreading it over her, and then opened the chest and pulled out a thick shawl, which he handed to her without looking at her undergarments folded beneath it. There was something respectful in that gesture, something that made her trust him despite not knowing who he was or why he had come to the ranch at dawn. "Thank you," she whispered, wrapping the shawl around her shoulders under the quilt. The layers of warmth were almost painful against her frozen skin, but she welcomed the sensation, the proof that she was alive, that she had survived. "What is your name?" he asked, crouching beside the bed so their eyes were level. Naomi Jensen, she said. I was married to Thomas Jensen, Raymond's younger brother. Thomas died 6 months ago. Kaine Quinn, he said, offering his hand. She took it, and his grip was warm and firm. I knew your husband not well, but we worked together on a cattle drive about 4 years back. He was a good man. I am sorry for your loss. How did you know to look in the shed? She asked. His jaw tightened. I rode in before dawn to talk to Raymond about buying some of his stock. I was passing the shed when I heard you pounding on the door. At first, I thought maybe an animal had gotten trapped inside, but then I heard you calling for help. His pale eyes darkened with anger. He locked you in there deliberately, didn't he? She nodded, tears suddenly burning in her eyes. He wants me to marry him or sign over my share of the ranch. I refused, and yesterday he pushed me into the shed and locked the door. I was in there all night. I thought I might freeze to death before morning. You nearly did, Kaine said grimly. He stood up and went to the window, looking out at the yard below, where Raymond presumably still waited. Do you have anywhere else to go? Family? Friends? No, she admitted. My family back east disowned me when I married Thomas. I have no money except what Thomas left me, which is tied up in this ranch. I have nothing. Kaine was silent for a long moment, his profile sharp against the morning light coming through the window. Then he turned back to her, and something in his expression had shifted, become determined. I have a ranch about 15 miles from here, closer to the mountains. It is not as big as this spread, but it is profitable, and I run it alone except for 2 hired hands. I could use someone to manage the house, to help with the cooking and the books. The pay would not be much, but you would have your own room, food, and safety. You could work for me until you figure out what you want to do next. Naomi stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You would do that for me? You do not even know me. I know you were married to a decent man, and I know your brother-in-law locked you in a shed all night to try to force your hand. That is all I need to know. His voice was matter of fact, but there was a thread of steel underneath. Besides, I meant what I said about needing help with the house. I am a fair hand with cattle and horses, but my cooking would make a strong man weep, and my bookkeeping is barely legible. Despite everything, Naomi felt a small smile tug at her lips. I am a good cook, and I managed all the household accounts when Thomas was alive. Then we have an agreement? Kaine asked. Yes, she said, the word coming out stronger than she felt. Yes, thank you. I accept your offer. Good. Rest here and get warm. I am going to go have a conversation with Raymond about your belongings and anything else that rightfully belongs to you. If he gives me any trouble, I will remind him that locking someone in a shed against their will is a crime, and Sheriff Morrison might be very interested to hear about it. Kaine, she called as he turned to go. He looked back at her and she swallowed hard. Why are you helping me like this? He was quiet for a moment, his pale blue eyes searching her face. Because someone should have helped you last night and no one did. And because I have a sister back in Wyoming, and I would hope that if she ever needed help, someone would step in for her the way I am stepping in for you. Then he was gone, his boots heavy on the stairs, and Naomi lay back against the pillows, pulling the quilt tighter around her still shivering body. She could hear raised voices from below, Raymond's angry and defensive, Kaine's low and implacable. She should have been afraid of what might happen, of how Raymond might retaliate, but instead she felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time since Thomas died, someone had stood up for her, had seen her as a person worth protecting rather than a burden or a piece of property to be controlled. The voices below grew louder, and then she heard boots on the stairs again. Kaine appeared in her doorway, carrying her traveling trunk, the one she had brought with her from Pennsylvania all those years ago. This is everything? He asked. Yes, she said. I do not have much. You have more than you think, he said cryptically, setting the trunk down. Get dressed in something warm for travel. We are leaving within the hour. I want to be well away from here before Raymond decides to do something stupid. Is he threatening you? Naomi asked, alarmed. He is making noise about it, but he will not follow through. He knows he is in the wrong, and he knows I know it. But men like Raymond do not like being backed into a corner, and I would rather not test his pride more than necessary. Can you be ready soon? Yes, she said. She waited until he left and closed the door, then forced herself out of the bed. Her body ached, her muscles stiff from the cold and from hours of shivering, but she pushed through it. She dressed quickly in her warmest traveling dress, a deep blue wool that Thomas had bought for her, and packed the few personal items she had left into a carpet bag. Everything else was already in the trunk. When she came downstairs 15 minutes later, Kaine was waiting in the hall with her trunk already loaded on a wagon outside. He took her carpetbag without a word and offered her his arm. She took it gratefully, her legs still unsteady, and let him guide her out to the wagon. Raymond was standing on the porch, his arms crossed and his face dark with anger. "You will regret this, Naomi," he called out. "You are making a mistake, running off with some stranger. You will come crawling back, and I will not be so forgiving next time." "There will not be a next time," Naomi said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Goodbye, Raymond." Kaine helped her up onto the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they pulled away from the ranch house, Naomi did not look back. She kept her eyes forward, on the road ahead, on the mountains rising in the distance, on the new life that awaited her, uncertain as it was. They rode in silence for the first mile, the only sounds the creaking of the wagon and the steady clopping of the horses' hooves. The morning sun was climbing higher, warming the air, and Naomi felt the last of the bone, deep cold, beginning to fade from her body. She studied Kaine from the corner of her eye, this stranger who had burst into her life and changed everything in the span of an hour. He had a strong profile, all clean lines and angles, and there was something solid about him, something dependable. His hands on the reins were steady and capable, scarred from hard work, and he sat with the easy grace of a man who had spent most of his life on horseback. She judged him to be in his late 20s, perhaps 28 or 29, only a few years older than her own 24 years. "You must think I am terribly foolish," she said quietly, "for staying at that ranch as long as I did after Thomas died." Kaine glanced at her, and his expression was thoughtful rather than judgmental. "I think you were in an impossible situation and did the best you could with the options you had. That is not foolishness, that is survival." "I should have left when Raymond started making those comments, when I first felt uncomfortable, but I had nowhere to go, and I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that he would not really do anything." "He is the one who should be ashamed, not you," Kaine said firmly. "What he did was wrong, and you have nothing to apologize for." They lapsed back into silence, but it was a comfortable one now, and Naomi felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. She watched the landscape roll by, the high plains stretching out on either side of the road, dotted with sagebrush and the occasional stand of cottonwoods marking a creek. The mountains loomed larger as they traveled, the San Juans rising up in magnificent peaks, still touched with snow on their highest summits, despite the late summer heat. "Tell me about your ranch," she said after a while, wanting to know what awaited her. "It is called the Quinn Ranch. Original, I know," Kaine said with a hint of humor in his voice. "I have about 300 head of cattle, a dozen horses, and 2 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse. The main house is small but solid, built of logs with a stone fireplace and a good roof. There are 3 bedrooms upstairs and a large main room downstairs with the kitchen. The view of the mountains is about the finest thing you will ever see." "It sounds wonderful," Naomi said honestly. "It is hard work, and the winters are harsh, but it is a good life. I bought the land 5 years ago with money I saved from working other ranches and doing some gold prospecting up in the mountains. I have built it up slowly, carefully, and I plan to keep building. Someday I want it to be one of the best ranches in the county." There was pride in his voice, but not arrogance, and Naomi found herself smiling. "I look forward to seeing it. I hope it lives up to your expectations, Kaine said. He hesitated, then added, I want you to know that you will be safe there. You will have your own room with a lock on the door. And my ranch hands, Ben and Charlie, are good men who know how to treat a lady with respect. If either of them steps out of line, you tell me immediately, and I will handle it. And if I ever do or say anything that makes you uncomfortable, you tell me that too. Naomi felt her throat tighten with emotion. After months of feeling powerless and afraid, his words were like a balm on an open wound. Thank you, Kaine. That means more to me than you know. They reached the Quinn Ranch just before noon, and Naomi's first sight of it took her breath away. The ranch house sat in a wide valley with a creek running through it, backed by towering mountain peaks that seemed close enough to touch. The house itself was exactly as Kaine had described, sturdy and well built, with smoke rising from the chimney and a wide porch facing the mountains. The barn and outbuildings were in good repair, and she could see cattle grazing in the pastures beyond. Two men emerged from the barn as they approached, both young and weathered from outdoor work. Kaine pulled the wagon to a stop and jumped down, then came around to help Naomi down. Ben, Charlie, this is Mrs. Jensen. She is going to be managing the house for us from now on. I expect you both to treat her with the utmost respect. Yes, sir, Mr. Quinn, the taller of the two men said. He had friendly brown eyes and a shy smile. Welcome to the ranch, Mrs. Jensen. Thank you, Naomi said, and please, call me Naomi. Help me get Mrs. Jensen's trunk upstairs, Kaine said to the men, and then I need you both back out working the north pasture. The ranch hands quickly unloaded the trunk and carried it inside and up the stairs, following Kaine's directions. Naomi followed more slowly, taking in the interior of the house. The main room was spacious and surprisingly clean for a bachelor household, with comfortable furniture arranged around a massive stone fireplace. The kitchen area was well equipped, and through the windows she could see the magnificent mountain view Kaine had promised. Upstairs, Kaine showed her to a bedroom at the front of the house. It was smaller than her room at Raymond's ranch, but brighter, with windows facing the mountains and a sturdy bed covered with a colorful quilt. There was a dresser, a washstand, and a rocking chair in the corner. The trunk sat at the foot of the bed, and Naomi noticed that someone had placed a vase of wildflowers on the dresser. Did you pick those? She asked Kaine, touched by the gesture. He actually looked embarrassed, a faint flush creeping up his neck. I thought it might make the room feel more welcoming. My sister always said flowers made a house feel like a home. They are lovely, Naomi said softly. Thank you. I will let you get settled, Kaine said, backing toward the door. Take your time, rest if you need to. There is no rush to start working. Today is about you getting comfortable here. Kaine, she said, stopping him at the door. I know I have already said it, but thank you. You saved my life this morning, and you have given me a second chance. I will not forget that. He looked at her for a long moment, his pale blue eyes serious. You do not owe me anything, Naomi. Everyone deserves a safe place to live and the chance to build a life. I am just glad I was there this morning when you needed help. Then he was gone, and Naomi was alone in her new room. She sank down onto the bed, her body suddenly heavy with exhaustion. The events of the past 24 hours caught up with her all at once, and she found herself shaking again, not from cold this time, but from the release of fear and tension. She had been so afraid last night, so certain she would die in that cold, dark shed, and now here she was in a bright, warm room with flowers on the dresser and the promise of safety. She let herself cry, soft tears of relief and gratitude and residual fear, and then she lay down on the bed and pulled the quilt over herself. Within minutes, she was asleep, her body finally able to rest now that she was truly safe. When she woke, the sun was low in the western sky, painting the mountains in shades of gold and pink. She sat up, disoriented for a moment, and then remembered where she was. The smell of cooking food drifted up from downstairs, and her stomach growled in response. She realized she had not eaten since yesterday afternoon, before Raymond had locked her in the shed. She quickly washed her face and tidied her hair, then made her way downstairs. In the kitchen, she found Kaine standing over the stove, stirring something in a large pot. He looked up when she entered, and relief crossed his face. "You are awake. I was starting to worry, but I figured you needed the sleep. How are you feeling?" "Better," she said honestly. "Warmer, less afraid." "Good. I am attempting to make stew, but I cannot promise it will be edible. This is why I need your help." He gestured to the pot with a rueful expression. Naomi moved closer and peered into the pot. The stew was actually not bad, just under-seasoned and the vegetables cut unevenly. "It needs salt and some herbs, but you are doing fine." "May I?" "Please," Kaine said, stepping aside with obvious relief. Naomi took over the cooking, finding the things she needed in the well-stocked kitchen. As she worked, Kaine set the table and told her about the ranch, about the cattle and the horses, about his plans for expansion. She found herself relaxing as they talked, falling into an easy rhythm that felt natural and comfortable. When the stew was ready, they sat down to eat, joined by Ben and Charlie, who had cleaned up after their day's work. The ranch hands were polite and friendly, asking Naomi questions about where she was from and what she thought of Colorado. The conversation was easy and companionable, and Naomi realized this was the first meal she had enjoyed since Thomas died. At Raymond's ranch, every meal had been tense and uncomfortable, but here at the Quinn Ranch, she felt welcome. After dinner, Ben and Charlie retreated to the bunkhouse, and Naomi insisted on cleaning up the kitchen while Kaine saw to some paperwork at the desk in the corner of the main room. She worked quietly, washing dishes and tidying up, and found herself stealing glances at Kaine as he worked. There was something about him that drew her attention, something beyond his obvious good looks. He had a quiet strength about him, a calm confidence that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in a long time. "Naomi," he said suddenly, looking up from his papers, "I want to make sure we are clear about something. You are not a servant here. You are an employee, which means you have rights and a voice. If there is something you need or want changed, you tell me. And if you ever decide you want to leave for any reason, you are free to do so. I will not stop you or make things difficult. I will even help you get wherever you want to go. Do you understand?" "I understand," she said quietly, "but I have no intention of leaving. I am grateful to be here." "Just know that you have options," Kaine said. "Always." That night, Naomi lay in her bed and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of her new home. The wind in the pines, the distant call of an owl, the creak of the house settling. She felt the lock on her door, solid and reassuring under her hand, and allowed herself to finally, truly relax. She was safe here. She was free here. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a small flicker of hope for the future. The days that followed fell into a comfortable pattern. Naomi woke early and prepared breakfast for everyone, then spent the mornings cleaning and organizing the house, which had been sorely neglected during Kaine's years of bachelorhood. In the afternoons, she worked on the ranch's books, carefully recording expenses and income, and she often prepared larger meals that would last for several days. The work was hard but satisfying, and she felt herself growing stronger, both physically and emotionally. Kaine was an easy man to work for, respectful and appreciative of everything she did. He often came in from working the ranch to find the house spotless and a hot meal waiting, and his gratitude was genuine and heartfelt. They began talking more over meals, sharing stories about their pasts and their dreams for the future. Naomi learned that Kaine had grown up in Wyoming, the eldest of 4 children, and had left home at 18 to make his own way in the world. He had worked as a ranch hand, a trail guide, and even briefly as a lawman before saving enough money to buy his own land. "Why Colorado?" Naomi asked one evening, as they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the mountains in brilliant colors. "The mountains," Kaine said simply. "They called to me in a way nothing else ever has. Wyoming is beautiful, but these mountains, there is something about them that feels like home." like I was meant to be here. I understand that, Naomi said. When Thomas first brought me out here, I was terrified. Everything was so different from Pennsylvania, so wild and vast. But after a while, I started to love it. The freedom of it, the beauty. I could never go back east now, even if my family would take me back. Do you miss them? Kaine asked. Your family? Sometimes, Naomi admitted. I miss my younger sister, Sarah. We were close before I left. But I do not miss the expectations, the rigid rules about how a woman should behave and what she should want. Out here, I feel like I can breathe. Kaine nodded, understanding in his eyes. The West is not easy, but it gives you the chance to be who you really are, not who society says you should be. As the weeks passed, Naomi found herself thinking about Kaine more and more often. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way he was gentle with the horses, the way he treated everyone with fairness and respect. She noticed how hard he worked, up before dawn and often not finishing until after dark, but he never complained or shirked his responsibilities. She noticed the small kindnesses he showed her, like bringing her wildflowers from the high meadows or making sure she had enough firewood for her room on cold nights. She tried to tell herself it was just gratitude, that she was confusing appreciation for something deeper, but she could not deny the flutter in her stomach when he walked into the room, or the way her heart beat faster when their hands accidentally brushed as they worked side by side. She had not expected to feel this way again, had not thought her heart was capable of opening up after losing Thomas. But Kaine was different from Thomas, and what she felt for him was different too. Sharper somehow, more intense. It was Kaine himself who brought things to a head one evening in late September. They had finished dinner and were sitting by the fire, Naomi working on some mending, and Kaine reading through some cattle auction notices. The nights were getting colder as fall settled over the mountains, and the fire crackled cheerfully in the hearth. Naomi, Kaine said suddenly, setting down his papers, I need to talk to you about something. The serious tone in his voice made her look up, concerned. What is it? Is something wrong? No, nothing is wrong. At least I hope not. He ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. I have been thinking about something for a while now, and I need to be honest with you. When I offered you a place here, I did it because it was the right thing to do, because you needed help, and I was in a position to provide it. But these past few weeks having you here, getting to know you, I have come to realize that my feelings have changed into something more than just wanting to help. Naomi's heart began to race. Kaine, what are you saying? He met her eyes, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. I am saying that I care about you, Naomi. More than I should, maybe, given how we met and the circumstances. I am saying that I think about you all the time, that I look forward to coming in from work because I know you will be here, that the thought of you ever leaving makes my chest tight. I am saying that I am falling in love with you, and I need to know if there is any chance you might feel the same way. Naomi set down her mending with shaking hands. You are falling in love with me? I know it is too soon, Kaine said quickly. I know you are still grieving your husband, and I do not want to pressure you or make you uncomfortable. If you do not feel the same way, I understand, and nothing has to change. You can stay here as long as you want, and I will never mention this again. But I had to tell you the truth because I cannot keep pretending that what I feel is just friendship or employer-to-employee courtesy. It is not too soon, Naomi said softly. At least not for me. She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. I love Thomas, and I will always be grateful for the time we had together. But he has been gone for 8 months now, and I have been alone for longer than that, really, because the last year of his life he was working in the mines and gone for weeks at a time. I have grieved him, and I will carry him in my heart always. But I am ready to move forward. And Kaine, when I think about moving forward, when I think about the future, I see you in it. I see us in it. Hope flared in Kaine's eyes. You do? I do, she said, her voice gaining strength. I have been trying to tell myself that what I feel for you is just gratitude, but it is more than that. So much more. When you walk into the room, my whole day gets brighter. When you smile at me, I feel warm inside. When you talk about your dreams for this ranch, I want to be part of making them come true. I am falling in love with you too, Kaine, and it terrifies me because I lost Thomas, and I do not know if I can survive losing someone I love again. But I do not want to let fear stop me from living, from taking a chance on something real. Kaine was across the room in 3 strides, kneeling in front of her chair and taking her hands in his. You will not lose me, he said fiercely. I promise you, Naomi, I will do everything in my power to keep that promise. I will be careful, I will be smart, and I will come home to you every single day. You cannot promise that, Naomi said, tears welling in her eyes. Life does not work that way. Then I promise this. I will love you with everything I have for as long as I am given, and I will fight with everything in me to make that as long as possible. Is that enough? Naomi reached out and cupped his face in her hands, feeling the roughness of his stubble, the warmth of his skin. Yes, she whispered. Yes, that is enough. Kaine leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, but Naomi did not want to pull away. She met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it was like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Then Kaine's arms came around her, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened, becoming something more passionate, more certain. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kaine rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that for weeks, he admitted. So have I, Naomi said with a soft laugh. I was starting to think I was going crazy, wanting you so much when we have only known each other such a short time. Sometimes you just know, Kaine said. My parents met and married within a month, and they were devoted to each other for 40 years before my father passed. My mother always said that when you find the right person, you do not need a lot of time to be certain. You just know in your heart. I know in my heart, Naomi said, looking into his pale blue eyes. I know that you are good and kind and strong. I know that you make me feel safe and valued and seen. I know that when I imagine my future, I want you in it. That is enough for me. They talked late into the night, sitting close together by the fire, making plans and sharing dreams. Kaine wanted to court her properly, he said, wanted to do things right. He would take her to dances in town, to church socials, would introduce her to his friends, and let everyone see that she was not just his housekeeper, but the woman he was courting with the intention of marriage. Marriage? Naomi asked, her heart skipping a beat. Eventually, Kaine said, if you will have me. I am not asking you to marry me right this minute, but I want you to know that my intentions are serious and honorable. When you are ready, if you are ready, I would be honored to make you my wife. I will need time, Naomi said honestly. Not because I doubt my feelings for you, but because I need to feel like I am making this choice freely, not because I am dependent on you or afraid of being alone. I need to know that I am choosing you because I love you, not because I need you. Do you understand? I do, Kaine said, and I respect that. Take all the time you need, Naomi. I am not going anywhere. In the weeks that followed, their relationship deepened and grew. Kaine was true to his word about courting her properly, taking her into Manasseh for dances and social events, introducing her to the community as the woman he was courting. At first, Naomi was nervous about how people would react, worried about gossip regarding how quickly she had moved on from Thomas and how she had left Raymond's ranch to live with another man. But the people of Manasseh were surprisingly welcoming and accepting. Many of them had heard whispers about Raymond's behavior and were glad to see Naomi free of him, and everyone seemed to genuinely like and respect Kaine. At the ranch, they worked side by side during the day and spent the evenings together, talking and laughing and learning more about each other. Kaine was careful to maintain proper boundaries, always treating her with respect and never pushing for more than she was ready to give. But there were stolen kisses in the barn, heated glances across the dinner table, and long conversations on the porch where they sat so close together that she could feel the warmth of his body against hers. Naomi found herself thinking more and more about what it would be like to truly be with Kaine, to be his wife in every sense of the word. She was not naive. She had been married before and knew what intimacy meant, but the thought of sharing that kind of closeness with Kaine made her feel things she had never felt with Thomas, a deep yearning that was both exciting and a little frightening in its intensity. One evening in mid-October, after they returned from a dance in town, Kaine walked her to her bedroom door, as he always did. But instead of the usual chaste goodnight kiss, Naomi found herself pulling him closer, deepening the kiss until they were both breathless and trembling. "Naomi," Kaine said hoarsely when they finally broke apart, "you are making it very difficult for me to be a gentleman." "Maybe I do not want you to be a gentleman right now," Naomi whispered, surprising herself with her boldness. "Maybe I want you to be the man I love who loves me back." Kaine groaned softly, resting his forehead against hers. "I want that too, more than you can imagine, but I do not want you to have any regrets. I do not want you to wake up tomorrow and wish we had waited." "I will not regret it," Naomi said with certainty. "I am ready, Kaine. I am ready to move forward, to stop being afraid, to take what I want. And I want you. Marry me," Kaine said suddenly, urgently. "Marry me, Naomi. Not someday, not eventually, but soon. As soon as we can arrange it. I want to do this right. I want you to be my wife. I want to build a life with you that we can both be proud of." "Yes," Naomi said, without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." The joy that lit up Kaine's face was beautiful to see. He kissed her again, and this time there was no holding back, no restraint. It was a kiss that promised everything: a future together, a love that would last, a partnership built on respect and desire and genuine affection. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Manasseh. Ben and Charlie served as witnesses, and several of Kaine's friends from town attended. Naomi wore a new dress of deep green velvet that Kaine had insisted on buying her, and she carried a bouquet of the last wildflowers of the season that Kaine had picked from the high meadows. Raymond did not attend, of course, and Naomi was grateful for his absence. She had heard through the town gossip that he had sold the ranch and moved away, unable to face the shame of what he had done, and the fact that everyone in Manasseh now knew he had locked his own sister-in-law in a shed. Good riddance, Naomi thought, and she did not spare him another thought on her wedding day. The ceremony was short but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Kaine kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. They returned to the ranch for a small celebration with Ben, Charlie, and a few other friends, and then finally, mercifully, everyone left and they were alone. Kaine carried her over the threshold of the ranch house, a tradition that made them both laugh, and then he carried her up the stairs to his bedroom, which was now their bedroom. He set her down gently beside the bed, and suddenly Naomi felt nervous, her earlier boldness deserting her. "We do not have to do anything tonight," Kaine said softly, reading her expression. "We have all the time in the world." "I want to," Naomi said. "I am just nervous. It has been a long time, and I have never been with anyone but Thomas." "I will be gentle," Kaine promised, "and we will go as slowly as you need. Just tell me if you want me to stop at any point, and I will. Your comfort and happiness are more important to me than anything else." His words and the sincerity behind them melted away Naomi's nervousness. She reached up and began unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly. "I do not want you to stop," she said. "I want to be your wife in every way." What followed was tender and passionate, a joining of two people who genuinely cared for each other and wanted to bring each other joy. Kaine was true to his word, gentle and patient, making sure Naomi was comfortable and that she found as much pleasure as he did. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the big bed, Naomi's head on Kaine's chest and his arms wrapped securely around her. I love you, Kaine murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy. You already make me happy, Naomi said, tracing patterns on his chest with her finger. Happier than I ever thought I could be again. You saved me, Kaine, in every way a person can be saved. You saved me too, Kaine said. I did not even realize how lonely I was until you came into my life and filled all the empty spaces. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and Naomi had never felt more safe or more loved. The months that followed were the happiest of Naomi's life. She threw herself into making the Quinn Ranch not just a workplace, but a true home, adding touches of warmth and comfort to every room. She planted a garden in the spring, started keeping chickens, and even convinced Kaine to get a milk cow. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts, with Naomi's careful management of the household finances allowing Kaine to invest in more cattle and better breeding stock. They worked together seamlessly, partners in every sense of the word. Kaine consulted her on major decisions about the ranch, valued her opinions and insights, and treated her as an equal rather than as a subordinate. In return, Naomi supported his dreams and worked hard to help make them a reality. Their love continued to deepen and grow, a solid foundation of respect and affection that weathered the inevitable challenges that came with ranching life. There were hard winters when they worried about the cattle, dry summers when they prayed for rain, and the constant physical demands of the work. But they faced everything together, and Naomi never once regretted her decision to marry Kaine. In the summer of 1883, nearly a year after that awful night when she had been locked in the shed, Naomi discovered she was pregnant. She told Kaine over dinner one evening, watching nervously for his reaction. She need not have worried. His face lit up with such pure joy that she started crying, and then he was around the table and pulling her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. We are having a baby, he said wonderingly. Naomi, we are going to be parents. Are you happy? She asked, though the answer was obvious. Happy does not even begin to cover it, Kaine said. He knelt down and pressed a kiss to her still flat stomach. Hello in there, little one. I am your father, and I already love you more than I can possibly express. Naomi's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Kaine hovered over her like a mother hen, constantly worried that she was working too hard or not resting enough. She found his concern endearing rather than annoying, and she let him fuss over her because she knew it made him feel better. In March of 1884, after a long but uncomplicated labor, Naomi gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas Kaine Quinn, honoring both Naomi's first husband and Kaine himself. Little Tommy, as they called him, had his father's pale blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, and he was the most perfect thing either of them had ever seen. Kaine was a devoted father from the very beginning, getting up with Naomi for late-night feedings, changing diapers without complaint, and spending every spare moment he had playing with his son. Watching him with Tommy made Naomi fall in love with him all over again, seeing the gentle, playful side of him that he rarely showed to anyone else. They had 2 more children over the next few years, a daughter named Catherine in 1886, and another son named Samuel in 1888. The Quinn Ranch rang with the sounds of children's laughter, and the house was filled with the beautiful chaos of family life. Kaine expanded the house to add more bedrooms, and they hired additional help to manage the growing ranch so that Kaine could spend more time with his family. The years passed in a happy blur of hard work, deep love, and simple joys. Naomi sometimes thought back to that terrible night in the shed, to how hopeless and afraid she had felt, and marveled at how much her life had changed. She had gone from being a frightened, desperate woman with no future to being a cherished wife, a mother, and a full partner in a thriving ranch. She had found not just safety, but true happiness, not just security, but genuine love. On a warm evening in the summer of 1895, Naomi sat on the porch of the Quinn Ranch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Kaine sat beside her, their hands linked, and their 3 children played in the yard with 2 ranch dogs that had become part of the family. Tommy was 11 now, already showing signs of becoming as tall and strong as his father. Katie was 9, with her mother's quick mind and her father's love of horses, and Samuel was 7, all energy and mischief and irrepressible joy. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if I had not ridden past that shed that morning? Kaine asked quietly. Naomi squeezed his hand. I try not to think about it. That night was the worst of my life, but it led to the best thing that ever happened to me. It led to you, to us, to all of this. I think about it sometimes, Kaine admitted. I think about how easily I might have missed you, how I almost did not stop when I heard that noise from the shed. And then I think about everything we would have lost if I had just kept writing. It makes me grateful for every single day we have together. I am grateful too, Naomi said. For you, for our children, for this life we have built. You saved me that morning, Kaine, but you have continued to save me every day since. You have given me a life I never dreamed was possible, filled with love and purpose and joy. Kaine turned to her, his pale blue eyes serious. You saved me just as much as I saved you. Before you came into my life, I was just existing, working hard and building the ranch, but with no one to share it with, no real purpose beyond the work itself. You gave me a family, a home, a reason to dream bigger. You made me a better man, Naomi. We saved each other then, Naomi said with a smile, and we built something beautiful together. Yes, Kaine agreed, pulling her close and pressing a kiss to her temple. Yes, we did. As the sun dipped below the mountains and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Naomi felt a deep sense of contentment settle over her. Her life had not been easy, and she had faced darkness and fear and loss, but she had also found light and love and hope. She had found Kaine, and together they had built a life that was rich in all the ways that truly mattered. The children's laughter rang out across the yard, and Kaine called to them that it was time to come inside for the night. As the family gathered together in the warm, welcoming house that Naomi had made into a home, she looked around at the faces of the people she loved most in the world and knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The shed where she had spent that terrible night was long gone, torn down years ago and replaced with a larger, sturdier building. But even if it had still stood, it would have held no power over her anymore. That night had been the ending of one chapter of her life, but it had also been the beginning of something infinitely better. It had been the night she lost everything, but it had also been the night that set her on the path to finding everything that truly mattered. Years continued to flow by like water in the creek that ran through Quinn Ranch property. Tommy grew into a fine young man who took over more and more of the ranch work alongside his father, showing the same dedication and skill that Kaine had always possessed. Katie became an excellent horsewoman and eventually married a neighboring rancher's son, a good man named Daniel, who loved her for her independence and intelligence. Samuel surprised everyone by developing a passion for medicine, and with his parents' support, he went east to study to become a doctor, intending to return to Colorado and serve the rural communities that so desperately needed medical care. Kaine and Naomi grew older together gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year. There were more grandchildren eventually, the house once again filling with the sounds of young voices, and Naomi discovered that being a grandmother was one of life's greatest joys. She and Kaine would sit on that same porch where they had spent so many evenings over the years, watching their grandchildren play in the same yard where their own children had played, and marvel at how blessed they were. On their 20th wedding anniversary, in the fall of 1903, Kaine surprised Naomi with a trip to Denver. It was the farthest she had traveled since coming west all those years ago, and she was excited about the adventure. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in elegant restaurants, and attended a performance at the Opera House. But Naomi's favorite part of the trip was simply walking through the city streets with her husband's hand in hers, window shopping, and people watching and enjoying each other's company away from the demands of ranch life. On their last evening in Denver, as they sat in the hotel dining room over a leisurely dinner, Kaine reached across the table and took her hand. Naomi Quinn, you have made me the happiest man alive for 20 years now. Thank you for saying yes to me all those years ago, for taking a chance on us, for building this beautiful life with me. Thank you for breaking down that door, Naomi said with a soft smile. Thank you for seeing me, for saving me, for loving me. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the shed? Kaine asked, his tone gentle. Even the shed, Naomi confirmed. Because it brought me to you, and you are worth every moment of fear and cold I endured that night. They returned to the ranch renewed and refreshed, ready to dive back into the work and the life they had built. But the trip had reminded them both of the importance of taking time for each other, of nurturing the relationship that was the foundation of everything else they had accomplished. From then on, they made a point of carving out time just for the two of them, whether it was a ride up into the mountains alone or a quiet evening by the fire after the grandchildren had been put to bed. The ranch continued to prosper under their management and eventually under Tommy's leadership as Kaine gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations. But Kaine never fully retired, always finding things to keep himself busy and useful. He and Naomi worked together in the garden she had expanded over the years, and they spent long afternoons fishing in the creek or riding through the mountain meadows they both loved. In the spring of 1910, Naomi was working in her garden when she looked up to see an unfamiliar wagon coming up the road to the ranch. A woman climbed down from the driver's seat, and as she got closer, Naomi gasped in shock and joy. It was Sarah, her younger sister from Pennsylvania, whom she had not seen in nearly 30 years. The sisters embraced tearfully, and Sarah explained that their parents had both passed away and that she had inherited their estate. She had used part of the inheritance to finance the journey west because she wanted to see her sister again, wanted to meet the family Naomi had built, wanted to heal the rift that had separated them for so long. Sarah stayed for 2 months, and by the time she left, the relationship between the sisters had been fully restored. Sarah promised to return the following summer and to write regularly, and Naomi felt as though a piece of her past had been healed and integrated into her present. Having her sister's blessing on the life she had built meant more to her than she had realized it would. As Naomi and Kaine entered their 60s, they began to slow down physically, but their spirits remained strong, and their love for each other continued to burn bright. They sat together on the porch more often now, content to watch rather than participate in the bustling activity of the ranch. They held hands like young sweethearts and still kissed goodnight every evening before they went to sleep. On a crisp autumn morning in 1920, 38 years after that fateful dawn when Kaine had broken down the shed door, Naomi woke to find her husband lying peacefully beside her, a slight smile on his weathered face. She knew before she touched him that he was gone, that his generous heart had simply stopped beating during the night. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain in her chest, but underneath it was a profound gratitude for the decades they had shared, for the life they had built, for the love that had sustained them both. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people from all over the county, testament to the respect and affection that Kaine had earned during his lifetime. Naomi stood with her children and grandchildren around her and spoke about the man she had loved, about his kindness and his strength, about how he had saved her life and then made that life worth living. Naomi lived for another 5 years after Kaine's death, surrounded by her loving family and the community they had helped to build. She remained active and engaged, still managing the ranch's books and still tending her beloved garden. But everyone could see that part of her had gone with Kaine, that she was waiting patiently to join him again. On a warm morning in June of 1925, Naomi sat on the porch of the Quinn Ranch for the last time. Tommy found her there an hour later, sitting peacefully in her favorite rocking chair with her eyes closed and a serene expression on her face. In her lap was a pressed wildflower, the kind Kaine used to bring her from the high meadows, and in her hand was the wedding ring Kaine had placed on her finger 43 years earlier. They buried her next to Kaine on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mountains that had called to both of them. The headstones were simple but elegant, bearing their names and the dates of their births and deaths, and below those, a simple inscription, "Together forever, love eternal." The Quinn Ranch continued to thrive under the stewardship of their children and grandchildren, and the story of how Kaine and Naomi had met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and passed down through the generations. It was a story about darkness and light, about fear and courage, about how a single act of kindness and bravery could change the course of two lives and create a legacy that would endure for generations. The shed where Naomi had been locked was gone, but its memory lived on as a reminder of how far she had come, how much she had survived, how strong she had proven to be. And the door that Kaine had broken down at dawn became a symbol of hope, of rescue, of the beginning of a great love story that had blessed not just two people, but an entire family and community. In the end, Naomi and Kaine's story was simple but profound. Two wounded souls had found each other at the moment they needed it most, had chosen to take a chance on love despite their fears and their pasts, and had built something beautiful and lasting that would continue to ripple outward long after they were gone. It was a story of redemption and second chances, of courage and compassion, of the transformative power of genuine love. And it all began with a locked door, a cold night, and a cowboy who rode up at dawn and chose to help a desperate woman in need. From that single moment of crisis and rescue, an entire lifetime of love and happiness had grown, proving that sometimes the darkest moments in our lives are simply the doorway to something brighter, if we are brave enough to step through when the door is finally opened. The mountains still stood watch over the Quinn Ranch, eternal and unchanging, bearing witness to the generations that came after Naomi and Kaine. The creek still ran through the property, providing life and beauty. The house they had built together still sheltered their descendants, filled with the same warmth and love that they had poured into it from the very beginning. And on quiet summer evenings, when the sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors and the wind whispered through the pines, some swore they could still see two figures sitting on the porch, hands linked, watching the mountains together, just as they had for more than 40 years. Whether it was just shadows and wishful thinking or something more, no one could say for certain. But the sight always brought comfort to those who saw it, a reminder that true love does not end with death, but continues on, eternal and unbreakable. A light that guides and inspires long after the original flame has passed from this world. The story of Naomi and Kaine Quinn became more than just family history. It became a legend in the county, told to young couples as an example of what real love looked like, shared at weddings as inspiration for the journey ahead. Teachers in the local schools taught it as an example of courage and resilience. And every year on the anniversary of that August morning when Kaine broke down the door, the Quinn family gathered at the ranch to celebrate not just the rescue, but everything that had grown from it. The legacy they left behind was not just the prosperous ranch or the large, loving family, though those were certainly significant. Their true legacy was the example they set of how to love fully, how to support and respect each other, how to build something meaningful together through hard work and dedication. They showed that it was possible to overcome trauma and fear, to open your heart again after loss, to take chances on uncertain futures and create something beautiful from them. Young women in the area who found themselves in difficult situations often thought of Naomi's story and found courage in it. Men who might have ridden past someone in trouble remembered Kaine's example and stopped to help. Parents told their children about the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect, of standing up against injustice, of being willing to take action when someone needed help. The wildflowers that Kaine had brought Naomi over the years had scattered seeds throughout the property, and now they grew everywhere, a riot of color in the spring and summer months. The family made a tradition of gathering wildflowers on special occasions, remembering how such simple gestures of affection had meant so much to the couple whose love had started it all. In the ranch house itself, Naomi's presence could still be felt in every carefully chosen detail, every handmade quilt, every recipe that had been passed down through the generations. Kaine's influence was evident in the solid construction of every building, the careful management of the land and livestock, the reputation for fairness and integrity that the Quinn Ranch still maintained decades after his death. The descendants who came after them, the great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren who never knew Naomi and Kaine personally, still felt connected to them through the stories and the legacy. They walked the same paths, looked at the same mountains, and tried to live up to the example that had been set so long ago. And always there was the story of the locked shed and the broken door, the cold night and the dawn rescue, the beginning of a love that had proven strong enough to last a lifetime and beyond. It was a reminder that life could change in an instant, that hope could be found in the darkest moments, that courage and compassion were among the most valuable traits a person could possess. The Colorado landscape that had witnessed their love story continued to endure, as eternal as the love itself. The seasons changed, the years passed, but the mountains remained, solid and steady, just as Naomi and Kaine's love had been solid and steady through all the challenges and joys of their years together. Their story was not just about survival or rescue, though it certainly began there. It was about what came after, about choosing love over fear, hope over despair, partnership over independence. It was about two people who recognized something valuable in each other and decided to nurture it, to protect it, to let it grow into something that would bless not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone around them. And so the story lived on, passed from generation to generation, a treasured piece of family history and a source of inspiration for anyone who heard it. The locked door had been opened long ago, but what had come through it, the love and the life and the legacy, remained open and available to all who needed its light. In the end, Naomi and Kaine Quinn's story was proof that from the darkest nights and the most desperate circumstances, something beautiful and lasting could grow. All it took was one person willing to stop and help, one person willing to take a chance, and two people willing to build something together. From that simple beginning, an entire world of love and family and meaning had emerged, as enduring as the Colorado mountains themselves and just as worthy of standing the test of time.